Your filth food!
Some gaming trends come and go. Much like the tide, we see once popular genres and features fall by the wayside, only to make way for another, stronger wave in the wake. This is just the natural order of the industry. But one particular subgenre has proved time and again that it's an influential and prolific force to be reckoned with in the gaming scene: the soulslike. Ever since its genesis in the 2000s, there have been a large number of titles that explore its challenging and lore-driven depths. While From Software reigns mostly supreme with these types of games, this hasn't stopped other companies, big and small, from trying their hand at the formula as well. That's where we get Another Crab's Treasure, the newest game from developer Aggro Crab, which showcases their attempt at the Souls-like subgenre. The previous game, Going Under, was excellent, and I felt like it didn't quite get the attention that it deserved, so I was excited to be able to play their newest title. My only cause for apprehension before starting the game was the fact that I have never once played a Souls-like in my life. I've previously been interested in them, but they've usually taken a backseat in my mind. Regardless though, the charming and adorable appearance of Another Crab's Treasure drew me in, and soon I found myself learning a thing or two about what it feels like to actually play a Souls-like. Another Crab's Treasure thrusts you into the role of Krill, a hermit crab who just wants to live a peaceful life in the tide pools with his favorite shell to call his home. Things quickly turn ugly though, when a literal loan shark comes in and demands Krill cough up unpaid taxation. Stealing Krill's beloved shell as payment, our hermit hero sets out into the vast ocean to reclaim his home. Sanctuary is scarce outside the tide pool though. The violent creatures lurk just around every corner of Krill's journey. Armed with only a rusty fork and whatever temporary shell he can make do with, Krill has quite the mountain to climb before he can live his peaceful life again. For a Souls-like, Another Crab's Treasure is on the lighthearted side of things, to say the least. But for my money, its wit and humor are the one biggest strengths. The irreverent comedy that Aggro Crab is known for is present here in full force. The moment the loan shark appears in the opening, it's clear just how tongue-in-cheek the game is going to be, but it never feels overwhelming or obnoxious. This approach isn't going to be for everyone, but for me, I was constantly amused by even the smallest lines of dialogue. Things take a bit of a turn early on too. It's a subtle turn, but it brings the mood down just enough to grab your attention and alter your expectations. As a protagonist, Krill is perfectly endearing and lovable. He is so incredibly down on his luck and flustered by the world outside of his safe haven. When things start going well for him, you really start to root for him. It feels great to help him climb higher and higher too, growing into a more capable warrior with every new level you earn and every new boss you take down. It helps that he has an adorable voice too, really bringing him to life as a character. The supporting cast is fun as well, though not necessarily anything more than that. Their dialogue is well written and their characterization is solid, and they fill their necessary roles. But for Another Crab's Treasure, the real enjoyment is found elsewhere. As mentioned previously, this is a Souls-like, and from what I can gather, it plays pretty similar to its counterparts. That's to say, it's a challenging action-adventure game that prioritizes careful and strategic movement during each of the smallest fights, because death is pretty common, and death is punishing. Each time you defeat a foe, you gain microplastics, which can be used both in the mini-shops found in New Carcinia, but also to augment your own stats. However, dying means you'll lose these microplastics, with only a single chance to be able to recover them from the location of your demise. As frustrating as the mechanic can be, the game never feels unfair. Each defeat was followed by only a moment of grief before I made my mad dash back to my lost loot, filled with the drive to do better next time. Progressing through each area did have some hurdles, but they were never so daunting that I wanted to give up. Each moment of progression feels truly rewarding, and each battle feels important since carelessness will quickly lead to your end. Bolstering all of this is the core mechanic of Another Crab's Treasure: shells. There are a large number of different shells available to the player, each with their own defensive capabilities, weight classes, and health bar. You are incentivized to wear one since you take massive damage without it. You lose access to your shield without it, and certain equipable stacks boosts are unavailable to you while you are naked. Each shell also has a special umami ability, which can often turn the tide in battle. Since your shell is guaranteed to never last forever, you're constantly switching up shells with whatever you can find, leading to the player needing to adapt at a moment's notice. You'll likely have a favorite shell and a favorite umami ability before the game is over, but even once you're able to ensure you respawn with that shell thanks to shell insurance, it also still only takes so long. Experimentation is key, and it's immensely engaging to be constantly switching your approach in combat on the fly. With the addition of skill tree abilities, your repertoire feels like it's evolving during every moment of Krill's adventure. This reaches its climax during the mini boss fight encounters in the game. It feels truly cathartic to die so many times, only to learn a little bit more each fight until you finally conquer your foe. Another Crab's Treasure never lets up when it comes to bosses either. Some are definitely easier than others, but they demand that you take them seriously. Even when you put the combat to the side, Another Crab's Treasure is great for its rewarding sense of exploration. Areas usually do offer a fairly linear route to get to where you're going, but there's often more found off the beaten path of the ocean's realms. While never truly dipping into being a true collectathon platformer, I definitely drew comparisons in my mind to those games on occasion. Seeing something glowing off in the distance is a good incentive to go exploring, and while you may not always find something rare, chances are you'll at least gain something you can sell for more microplastics. It's just a joy to explore these areas anyway, for how visually diverse they are and all the fun little details that they've been packed in. The vastness of the ocean is very well realized with certain zones, while the areas that are piled up with trash from the human world can turn everyday products into landmarks and unique contraptions. There are a few references on so many of the discarded objects as well, to titles that Aggro Crab has developed and to other indie hits. Even some from Software's own titles. Another Crab's Treasure isn't what I would call a beautiful game, but it is visually interesting, with so many charming inclusions that make it impossible to not crack a smile as you explore. The sometimes moody vibe of each zone also tunes in well with the other darker implications of the narrative, and the soundtrack is a great accompaniment to this. The OST really enhances the whole experience, making each boss battle tense and exciting, giving each zone its unique flavor and selling the more comedic moments of the story. A nice touch, too, is the variety of footstep sounds. As Krill skittles around, his steps will generate a different sound depending on what he's walking on, and in the world where a flip-flop is sometimes used as a bridge, this can lead to a surprising amount of variety. I just think it's worth noting that it just illustrates how much care and attention went into the presentation of this game. It's unfortunate then that there does seem to be a lack of polish in some areas. Early on, I was encountering some awkward glitches while climbing up netting, and it's possible to die in one area if you try to grapple across a patch of water. None of these issues are really game-breaking, they're just noticeable hiccups in the quality of the game that I couldn't help but notice. It's likely some of these issues will be fixed post-launch though, so I'm not too worried about them going forward. However, what I feel like is the bigger issue is probably the camera. This is probably the biggest obstacle in my opinion. In more open areas, the problems are non-existent, but once you start fighting in the enclosed areas, the camera knocks into the walls more often than not and starts to interrupt the flow of the combat, making it much more difficult to concentrate on your unhindered opponents. This does not make the game unplayable, however, and once you get used to the camera's quirks, the ebb and flow of the combat returns. It's just a blemish on this overall great experience. In terms of other flaws, I feel that those who are more familiar with Souls-like might find this game a little on the easy side. For me, who's a beginner to all of this, it was perfectly balanced. However, I think that the game difficulty is balanced and customized enough when you can consider how many variables there are to experiment with. Another Crab's Treasure has taught me why the Souls-like formula is as beloved as it is, and I say that without hyperbole. The size of the difficulty mountain can be intimidating, and I often found myself stumbling, desperately reaching for some progression, but I always feel that the game respected me and my time. It meets you at its level and encourages you every step of the way, and while it offers you some aids to lessen the frustration, it never cheapens out when it comes to the core combat encounters. I can't stress enough how exhilarating that rush is when you start improving during a boss that even you died on from time to time. You can still see the light at the end of the tunnel. Then, when the health bar finally empties, you feel a genuine sense of accomplishment that you have conquered that mountain. So for those who've never tried a Souls-like before, I urge you to give this game a try, as it feels like the ideal starting point. Those who are more experienced might find a few challenges here, if enough creativity is applied in the right places. But regardless of experience level, you'll find hours of charming, enjoyable, and tense gameplay. Aggro Crab has done an amazing job turning Another Crab's Treasure into a game truly worth getting your claws into. Noisy Pixel is giving Another Crab's Treasure a 9 out of 10. Thanks for watching. This video is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon. Noisy Pixel is run by a group of gamers providing independent gaming coverage through news, reviews, previews, and more. Check out our Patreon to help support our continued growth, and subscribe to keep up with all our future content.
Noisy Pixel.